What's up, Rangers? Welcome to the Geek Chest. My name's Steve. I got paint still on my hands because today we're going to go over latest commission for a Spitfire 1954 Godzilla. As you can see, this is the NECA figure, which, when I was contacted for the commission, just wanted a traditional, more Spitfire looking of the 54, which is Godzilla doing the atomic blast. Now, I did a little bit extra, just because. This is actually a part of the commission. I just kind of tossed it together because I thought it'd be kind of weird that he would look like a Spitfire but not have its own breath effect. And it's pretty simple to kind of put one of these together. So we'll talk about that here in the video. And then the paint job for this guy. The base is mine. Just was working on it for a little bit. I actually had a video started for it, and then I lost pretty much all the footage, and then once I started putting this back together, I decided to finish it out because I had it mostly done, but I had to add all like the rubble effects and paint it and whatnot. And the game plan was to make it black and white to match the 54 monster art that's upstairs, because actually currently don't have a 54 NECA anymore. I have the 62 poster for 56 poster, but not the traditional one. But anyways, I guess we'll start going over the closer details. If you guys want to see how this base real quick, just to show you guys, it's actually a lot of insulation foam, craft foam, actual foam for the sides of the walls, some balsa wood for the trimming here for along the ridges here, and then got some little like the little sewing plastic sheets. Saw some stuff falling off of it. Some paper clips for the metal studs coming out. It's supposed to be kind of gives it like that piping, like the rods that would have been in there. Look, you guys can see right there. There's some sticking out here. Noticing after it's dried, there's still a little bit of green mixed in there. Gonna have to touch it up a little bit more. But for the most part, you're just going to be seeing it on the shelf like this, so I'm not even sure if I'm going to mess around with it too much. But the core of this is the insulation foam. Got the craft foam here for the rubble. You just rip it up. Not really much else to talk about. There's just the foam on top. Sprayed it with some plastic dip to give it some texturing. Then went over it with a primer to give it the gray look. And then went over it with a darker primer. Or not darker primer. Darker gray paint. The pavement color to give it some texturing. Then went over it with a little bit of light here and there, again just to give it a little bit more depth of character. Added some black on the back here just to get some coloring to designate the windows. But yeah, pretty happy with it overall. Like, it looks great. It's supposed to be kind of like the Diet building that you saw him smashing through in the film. But this will be going with the 1954 upstairs. But sadly, I don't have any footage of me assembling that guy. But for this, it was a pretty basic paint job for him. What I did first was actually put this beam effect together. Which what this is a straw with hot glue over it. So it's a clear straw, hot glue, and then the cotton here for the base. How I assembled it was took the straw, went over it with a mix of Mod Podge and some gray paint to give it some different coloring underneath the glue here. So I went over that and then started lining it with the hot glue. So what you want to do is you make a... Ideally, you want to use a smaller glue gun. I could only find my big one at the moment. But you just start making some lines. Do a strip all the way down. You're going to want to make sure you have something inside of the straw so you don't burn yourself while holding on to it. And then, as much as you can while it's hot, you want to just keep making strips. And you want to try to keep them close enough together. Once you go over the entire straw, you let it cool. And then start going over it again and trying to hit any little gaps you miss in the process. Which what that's going to do is it gives it this nice texturing over top of it that looks like the beam effect. Plus, because we're using hot glue over top of the paint, it's translucent. So, you see the gray underneath and then you get the clear on top. And then what I did after setting all that up is I took some plastic from a display box, adjusted this, had the Godzilla hold onto it, and then put a crap ton of hot glue on the bottom here to kind of make a base, if you will. held on to that till it hardened up. You can also use cold water. Also helps to cool it down a bit, especially when doing the base, because there's going to be just like a giant glob of hot glue. You're going to want to make sure you don't adjust your beam much while trying to cool it down, but you can take it, cool it down with some hot water or with some cold water. And then once that was all set up, went back over this with another mix of glossy Mod Podge and a pearl white, which gives it the reflective white coloring over top of it, which I thought kind of replicated the movie pretty decently. You could also just like take a straw, take some cotton, wrap, use hot glue, and then wrap the cotton around the beam. Would also actually work because it still would give it that like fire extinguisher look, which I could possibly do a video for that if you guys would like to see more ways of making a beam effect. This is just a pretty simple one to do. Then after doing all the paint, just took another layer of hot glue around the base. Took my cotton that I spray painted with some primer, and that makes a smoke bloom. And also hides your crimes because for the most part, like, you're not going to be able to make this beam super thick with the hot glue without spending a crap ton of time on it. But with the bloom here, kind of gives it like that explosion look. Also for the 54 instances, works perfect because you just have to do blacks and whites. If you wanted to add a little bit more color, you could always just use different paints. Ideally, you'd have to spray paint it, though. Doing a brush would kind of look eh. Or you could light it up. Again, that'd be something, if you guys would be interested, we could do it in another video. But lighting this up would actually be pretty cheap to do as well. And you can still do the same kind of effect. But for this, wanted to keep it fairly inexpensive, so we went with this route. For the Godzilla here, was actually probably the more simpler paint job that I've done for one of these guys. The only hard part is, of course, for this, we had to paint the eyes, because initially when I got the figure in, if I have the photo here, the eyes were super googly, straightforward, not very 1954 looking. But he wanted it to look like Godzilla's doing his atomic breath. Sort of like what NECA does a lot with the Spitfire Godzilla figures. So what I did was just took my airbrush, used the same pearl white that I used for the beam effect here, and just started lightly going over the beam. What's nice about that paint in particular is when you water it down and start going over this, since I didn't primer it, it's just going to tint everything. So that's why it still has a little bit of that gray look to it, especially when you first are doing your first couple of passes over top of it. But you're going to want to do at least a couple passes, but that'll give you this nice metallic finish. When spraying it, I wanted to make sure I have a little bit on the body, but not go too crazy, because you imagine when he's doing his blast, it's going to make up that lighting effect, and you even see it in the film. But again, don't want to go too crazy. Like, you don't want the blue or the coloring to be barfed everywhere, but it gives it this nice metallic kind of pearl look to it, and gives it a little bit of like more radioactive glow. You're gonna want to make sure to get inside the crevices here of the dorsal spines as well. For the film, from what I could tell, it's mainly the back region here and the tail. I decided to go a little bit more up the head, a little bit down the back. Just for the most of the Showa Godzillas, it tends to be where the light up is. And to me, it kind of makes a little more sense. But you can see going along the tail here. But for my first pass, was just using the normal pearl white that was there. So as you can see, the coloring kind of tapers as you come down the tail. Same with towards the top of the head. It's not as bright. And then for my final pass, I actually mixed in some white paint with my concoction for the pearl, and then went over it one more time, just kind of around the edges to help brighten up the center mass here, which I think turned out overall pretty good. Looks nice. It's got that nice radioactive glow to it. It's just kind of weird because you're kind of stuck with black and white color schemes for this guy. So for the most part, it's just a brighter gray, kind of like what you've seen in the film. Also did a little bit around the mouth here as well. Looking at the film, it doesn't really do that, but it makes sense. Left the chest alone because, again, you don't see it in the film, so I didn't really want to be like adding some brightness to the chest and making this kind of look like an Imperial. But did add it around the mouth, so when you have the beam effect, also did the inside of the mouth as well. inside of the mouth, it gives it that nice kind of radioactive look with just a little bit of lighting around the mouth. Didn't want to go too crazy. It's got a little bit of like the Imperial lipstick vibe by itself anyways. But to be fair, like him just standing there, it's not too bad. But preferably you want something inside of his mouth to give him look. And finally, for the eyes, had to repaint them. For this one in particular, wanted to keep it still looking very puppety, if you will. As per the commission, I wanted the eyes to be straight. If you see in the film, the eyes are actually would be more a little bit off-centered and down on both sides. So when he would be looking straight, it would look kind of funky. But so wanted them looking straight, but I still kept them like slightly googly. I mean, that's mainly just because the way the head sculpt, the eyes aren't going to be quite straight looking. But I kept it more akin to like how you kind of see when the puppet's looking at you. Just to me, it looks a little more terrifying and film accurate, but just a little bit of a closer look. But I do think they turned out really nice. The only thing that's kind of hard when it's just black and white is when you're doing the circles. You can't really hide the crimes by adding extra detailing. So you got to be pretty honest when setting up these eyes, but looks really nice. And then, yeah, that's pretty much it. After that, just mixed up some clear matte Mod Podge with some water. Went over top of the spines here, the mouth, the eyes, just to make sure when articulating it, you don't have to quite worry about the paint coming off as much. Still got to be careful because with any kind of custom figure, excessive play is going to remove some of the paint. But for the most part, the way the detailing is set up right now, shouldn't be that big of an issue. And this guy will be going out today. Again, if you guys are interested in maybe me doing like a custom beam video, we could also do that. Go over some options for you guys to do. Well, majority of it's gonna be hot glue if you want to keep it inexpensive, but we could mess around with it a little bit. And help us defeat those kaiju by hitting the like button, subscribe, become a ranger today, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Oh yeah, we also have Instagram, Pinterest, Patreon, and Facebook. Guys like to keep up with the channel and donate, we greatly appreciate it. Also, if you guys would be interested in your own commission, you can get a hold of me on Instagram at Unimportant Steve or on our Facebook. Easiest way to get a hold of me if you guys would like to discuss options, if you will. And see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.